All right, have you ever really stopped to think about it? How you can just decide to, lift your arm, and it just happens? It feels so simple. But what's going on under the hood is this absolutely incredible feat of biological engineering, and it's happening inside you, constantly. So today, we're going to unpack the beautiful, intricate mechanics behind every single move you make.
So yeah, this is the big question, right? How does a simple thought become a real physical action? We're about to go on a journey that starts with a command firing in your brain and takes us all the way down to the molecular level. We're talking about the microscopic engines that power our world. And believe me, the answer is, well, it's way more amazing than you might think.
To figure this out, we need to zoom in. I mean, way, way in. We're going past the skin, past the muscle itself, and deep, deep down into the fundamental building blocks of movement. So let's start peeling back those layers.
Okay, so every muscle you have is basically a big bundle of muscle fibers. But the real magic happens when we go even deeper. You see, inside every single one of those fibers, it's packed with these long cylindrical things called myofibrils. And this is where the action really begins.
And we're not done zooming in yet. Inside each of those myofibrils, you've got millions upon millions of even tinier protein filaments. Now, these aren't just passive strands of stuff. These are the active, moving parts of our microscopic engines. They are literally the nuts and bolts of how we move.
So, what exactly are these tiny filaments? Well, it's time to meet the two main characters in our story. The whole entire process of muscle contraction really just comes down to this elegant little dance between these two key players.
And here they are. On the left, we've got the thin filament, and it's called actin. For now, just think of it as a kind of rope. And on the right, we have the thick filament, myosin. This is our motor. This is the part that actually does all the pulling. As you can see, their shapes are very different, and they're perfectly designed for the jobs they have to do.
Now, this actin filament isn't just one protein. It's more like a whole team working together. You've got the main actin structure. That's our rope. But wrapped all around it is another protein called tropomyosin. You can think of it like a safety guard that blocks the spots where myosin needs to grab on. And holding that guard in place is a third protein, troponin. It acts just like a lock, keeping everything secure.
And here's our engine, the myosin filament. The really crucial parts are these two little globular heads. They're these incredible little machines. They can grab onto the actin rope, and they can also grab onto ATP. And ATP is basically the high-energy fuel for all of our cells. It's these heads that do all the heavy lifting. So, where does all this amazing stuff happen? It takes place in a tiny little structure called the sarcomere. This is the basic, fundamental contractile unit of a muscle. It's a repeating section of the myofibril that stretches from one Z-line to the next. This is the arena, the stage, where the whole drama of contraction unfolds. Okay, so we've got our players, actin and myosin, and we've got our stage, the sarcomere. But here's the thing. They don't just start moving all by themselves. They need a signal, a trigger to kick everything into gear. And that signal, believe it or not, comes in the form of a very special little ion.
You guessed it. It all starts in your brain. Every single voluntary movement you make begins as an electrical impulse fired from your nervous system. That signal zips down a specialized nerve cell called a motor neuron, and it's headed straight for its target muscle fiber.
And this sets off an incredible chain reaction. First, that nerve impulse arrives. This causes the release of a chemical messenger called acetylcholine. When that messenger binds to the muscle, it creates a whole new electrical wave called an action potential that just zaps across the entire muscle fiber. And here's the critical step. That electrical wave triggers the release of a flood of calcium ion. And this right here is where it all comes together. That flood of calcium is the key that unlocks everything. Just like this quote says, the calcium ions go and bind to troponin. Remember, that's the lock on our actin rope. This binding action makes it change shape, and that change pulls the tropomyosin guard wire right out of the way. Boom! The binding sites on the actin filament are finally exposed. The stage is officially set for action.
So, with the actin binding sites now wide open, our myosin engines can finally get to work. What happens next is the main event, a super fast 4-step cycle that is the absolute essence of muscle contraction.
Okay, let's break this amazing cycle down. Step 1, the myosin head uses energy from ATP to get itself into a ready, high-energy position. It's cocked and loaded. Step 2, it reaches out and grabs onto an open spot on the actin, forming what we call a cross bridge. Step 3, the power stroke. This is the big move. The head pivots, and in doing so, it yanks the actin filament inwards, toward the center. And finally, step 4, a brand new ATP molecule shows up and binds to the myosin head, which makes it let go of the actin. Now it's detached, ready to do the whole thing all over again.
And I want you to appreciate the speed here. This isn't a one-and-done thing. This entire 4-step cycle, bind, pull, release, repeat, is happening hundreds of times a second across millions of myosin heads, all at the same time, for as long as calcium and fuel are available. It's this furious yet perfectly coordinated microscopic dance.
So, we've seen this incredible little cycle. Now, let's zoom back out and look at the big picture. What's the result? What actually happens to the whole muscle when millions of these tiny cycles are happening all at once? Here it is, plain and simple. On top, you've got a relaxed sarcomere, and on the bottom, a contracted one. See what happened? The myosin heads have pulled the actin filaments in toward the center, and that drags the Z-lines, the boundaries of the sarcomere, closer together. The entire unit literally gets shorter. Now, if you take one thing away from all of this, let it be this. It is a super common misconception that the protein filaments themselves are scrunching up or getting shorter. They absolutely do not. The actin and myosin filaments, they always maintain their original length. They simply slide past one another. And that's it. That's why it's called the sliding filament model. And honestly, here is the perfect analogy to lock this in your brain. Imagine that the myosin is a person standing in the middle of a room, and they're grabbing 2 ropes, and those ropes are attached to the opposite walls. By pulling on the ropes, hand over hand, the person doesn't get shorter, the ropes don't get shorter, but the walls, our Z-bands, get closer together. That is exactly what's happening inside your muscles millions of times over.
And this quote just sums up the collective result beautifully. As all those actin filaments get pulled towards the middle, each individual sarcomere shortens. And when millions and millions of sarcomeres do this all at the same time, your entire muscle contracts. And that, right there, is how a simple thought becomes a powerful action.
So, from a nerve impulse to a flood of calcium ions to a microscopic tug-of-war repeated millions of times in a fraction of a second, that is the engine that powers you. It really makes you wonder, right? What other incredible, invisible biological machines are at work inside us at this very moment, hiding in plain sight?